So welcome back to the Pool Chasers podcast. And today we have Megan Kendrick with us. How are you, Megan?
I'm doing good. We're back at it.
Back at it. It's March. Is it getting any warmer where you're at?
Yes, but unfortunately that means that we've already had our first wave of tornadoes. So that's not great.
It's terrifying.
Yeah, it's a little early for there to be tornadoes. So I don't know if that's going to be good or bad for the season. But yeah, we had a few hit Norman, not us fortunately, but definitely helping some friends clean up their places without roofs.
Yeah. So do you have a game plan if one is to come near your house? You just going to run into your podcast studio or what?
No, definitely not. No, we have a storm shelter for sure. So when we bought the house, there wasn't one, which you would think that in this area, that would just be part of normal construction.
Hell yeah.
But it's not. So when we bought our house, which wasn't like that old, it was built in, 2007 or something. There wasn't a storm shelter. And so within the first week of living here, we had one installed in our garage. So we're ready.
Super smart. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's actually a stand-up comedian that does this whole bit about living in a trailer park and what the people in the trailer park do if there's a tornado, and they'll be like, go to the nearest house that has a shelter. And he's like, I don't know if you're familiar with, people that live in trailer parks, but people that live in houses aren't usually so welcoming. So they're like, well, if that doesn't work out, just, find a ditch and go lay in that. And it's just hilarious. But
I know.
It's kind of true, I'm sure.
Yeah, it is. Well, and you'd think too that there would be, there are community shelters, but not as many as you think and not as accessible as you think. And people get confused too. They think that they can just go to a school and go in and use their shelter. Or schools are built so that they are protected from tornadoes a lot of times in Oklahoma. But yeah, you can't just do that. So it's, but that being said, most people around here have a pretty solid plan because it's just part of life. So
yeah, if you live there, it is what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is.
So it's the beginning of March when we're recording this. The March-April issue is just about out. You have the digital issue that people can go online to your website. They can go to poolpromagazine.com, right?
Poolpromag.com. Pool Pro Magazine was not available and also is very long to type.
It's because I bought it. I'll sell it to you for a real cheap price.
Yeah, like $1 million. That's usually what people who own domains want.
Exactly.
Or some ridiculous amount.
And you have the physical issue that people can pick up from SCP, Superior, all that good stuff. So far, what has been, kind of the feedback on it?
Yeah, it's been fun because I think, we talked a little bit about it last time and I was definitely nervous about how it was going to go. But fortunately, feedback has been good. I always get myself worked up, usually for no reason. So yeah, it's still a little early because, honestly, today is our official launch day, even though things have kind of been floating out there for a while. So over the next 5 to 10 days, we'll really get a good feel for what people think. But yeah, so far the feedback has been really good. And, people are always excited to see themselves in the magazine. And so I've been getting a lot of comments from people that we talked to and interviewed and photographed about, how excited they are about it. So that's really fun.
Yeah. How are things going with, kind of finding a photographer in the city, especially for the main person on the spread? How is that coordinating all of that been?
Yeah. So honestly, we have gotten so lucky with how we do that. So we do at least one photo shoot for every issue. We go out to whoever we're featuring in kind of our at the shop department where we profile one business in the industry. We always send a photographer out to take pictures of those guys. And yeah, we've just gotten really lucky. We've only had a handful of just duds. And even when we get duds, we usually can kind of figure out a way to make it work, which is, sort of a hats off to our design team. And I think also it just talks about just speaks to kind of how flexible we are when it comes to stuff. Like we're not going to, we're not going to stress out if something doesn't come in perfect. We're going to pivot, right?
Exactly.
So, and I think for this issue, we definitely were doing some last minute pivots, the day or two before we sent the issue to the printer, working with our art director. And I was just like, I know this was my idea. It's not working and we've got to change it. And she's like, great.
We got to do some scratch and sniff chlorine pages.
Yeah. I was like, this just is not pulling together. Because our originals, so on the cover, we've got some people from Biolab and like Todd from Aquastar, and they're kind of in front of this like chlorine symbol, right? And so originally we had thought we'd put a bunch of different people on the inside of the cover, inside too, on the spread that introduces that story. That's like, just a bunch of different people around the word chlorine. But once we did that, it just didn't make sense because some of these people didn't really have anything to do with the manufacture of chlorine. And I was like, I think this is a stretch. Not really sure. Like we haven't interviewed these people for this story. Like this, I don't think anyone's going to make this connection. So we just scrapped that and with some icons instead.
Yeah. So the people that are on the front of the magazine don't really necessarily have anything to do with chlorine, correct?
Well, so the Biolab folks do, absolutely. So their company participated in that article. Alicia and Jamie were not in particular quoted in that article because for this, we wanted to talk to some people who are much more on the technical side of their business, which they were great to supply to us. Brian and Jeff, they were a wealth of information. So the the company, yes, but then we couldn't get pictures of Jeff and Brian. So, it was a little madness, I think.
I bet. How was it received from the actual chlorine manufacturers? Because, you were talking about the old one burning down and then building a new facility. I'm assuming you had to share that article with them prior.
Yeah, we definitely did a fact check with them, but not so much because we were worried about talking about that. Mostly just worried that I would screw up the technical aspects of the things we talked about. And those were the changes that they had for us was, this isn't the correct word.
Right.
So actually both Biolab and HASA were really great and really transparent and didn't really dictate what went in the article. I mean, I think it helped too that it was just really this is what happened and this is how it works and this is how it's supposed to work and this is how we had to make things work during the pandemic. So yeah, it wasn't too sensitive, I think, of information.
That's good. That's good. Is there anything else you wanted to share on that? I'm sure we'll have more later on, but
yeah, no, I mean, when it's all said and done, there are always changes I wish we could have made or more that we could have added or, just more details that could have been included. But, at the end of the day, I mean, you have a deadline, right? And sometimes you have to say, all right, it is what it is. We're going to send it. But that being said, I think that for this one in particular, I felt like it turned out good for a story about how chlorine is made. Right.
Yeah. I mean, is that difficult for the team? I mean, that's pretty much everyone's job is to kind of switch gears, every month. I'm sure people are writing about different topics, even in the same day, they're, jumping from project to project.
It can be. You definitely have to be very organized, I think, to stay on top of on doing this kind of a job. It's kind of interesting because I have realized that what we really need more so than like really talented journalists on our team are really talented project managers. And we actually just made a change and brought on someone new who that is definitely their strength. They're a good writer. They are an amazing project manager. And so that's really great. The other thing that makes it difficult for writing about the pool industry in particular is that we try really hard to front load a lot of our writing so that we're doing it in the fall and winter, because I hate trying to get pool guys on the phone from May through August. I mean, it's a nightmare. And so for stories that aren't super timely and that can be written kind of at any time during the year, we try to do as much of the writing as we can before it hits the season and everybody gets crazy busy and disappears. So that makes it a little bit harder too, because we've sort of given ourselves our own time crunch. And once you get off that schedule, which you inevitably do because things happen, it can get pretty tough to catch up.
Right. If you don't mind me asking, what type of project management software do you use to keep organized?
Oh man.
Many.
We use Monday.com.
Awesome.
We had used Project Place, which we weren't very happy with, and we made the switch to Monday a couple of years ago, and it's really great. It's simple to use. It's easy to add people. For us, we've got people who are on staff, and then we have like writers who aren't, or we have copy editors who will work on things per project. And so the nice thing about Monday is it just makes it really easy to organize that for them so that they can see really quickly like what tasks they are assigned to and they need to get done without having to dig through a bunch of stuff and emails and everything. Like they just, can pull it up, click on what they need to do it and be done.
Yeah, it's really good for accountability. If stuff's in there and it's assigned to you or to somebody else, you could just be accountable because these are the things that have to get done. I'm sure they all have deadlines on, each one of those. Yes.
Yeah. Do you guys use that too? Or have you used it?
So I'm like a project management head, like a shoe head or, junkie, but I use so many, but Monday has probably been the one that's been most consistent in my life. I used it back when it was called the Pulse. Long time ago. It was
look at you. Yeah.
It was
every once in a while you'll still find some like Pulse terminology in there if you're digging through like the back end trying to make something trying to make Monday talk to another program.
Yeah. I didn't understand why the hell they called it the Pulse in the beginning and then they switched it over to Monday. I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah.
But it works. The other one that I like too is Notion. That's not necessarily for everybody, but definitely it looks a lot cooler and but Monday is in this area too, where you can make it as complicated as you want. There's tons of automation features.
We actually use Monday to manage our entire 30 under 40 contest because you can attach forms, and so everyone's information gets pulled into Monday, where then our team can everyone gets assigned each person and we all go in and rank them and do all the things that we need to do. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty great, and it pretty much talks to all the other programs that we use in our business. And so there's probably a lot more that we could do with it, but
yeah.
You can also like over automate your life a little bit too.
Hell, I'll tell you right now, you can definitely overdo it.
Are you the kind of person that do you look for an app kind of for everything? Because I find myself doing that where I'm like, okay, I need to figure out a way to make this faster or easier. And so I'm always looking for how can we do that? And I think I probably turn to software and apps and stuff maybe more than I should. And maybe expect more out of them than I should.
I learned probably maybe a couple years ago that that's just not possible to have something do every little thing.
Yeah.
Probably now I'm looking for a company, with a little more depth and weight that can actually, just because it looks cool doesn't mean that they have the bandwidth to actually keep up.
That's
and
true.
That was a big thing. Like I really liked Notion when it first came out, but it was a small company and they didn't have, as many servers as they needed to. So you'd get some, drop off, or, the servers will be down or something like that. And, Monday's a huge company and it's quick, it's reliable, and that's what you need. I mean, a lot of businesses rely on that. And I'll say the more, a lot of podcasts I've listened to lately, there are some like really big companies now, like using Monday.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just so easy. I think that's the huge thing that everyone loves about it.
And the dashboard feature, I that's something that I like as well, is being able to kind of pull all that in.
Yeah. I feel like I don't use that probably as much as I should. Probably because we're like too behind all the time. So it's more like, it's not so much the forward planning as I want it to be, and more the what do I have to get done immediately.
Well, it's good for like bird's eye views. You know what I mean? Like not that, it has to be a super technical dashboard, but if you can kind of pull in, the percentage, of this, project, or where it's at and how many of these forms are completed. And I have like all the pool industry podcasts, like in there. So every time somebody puts out a new show, like it'll populate, or magazines, different things like that. So it's so smart that like there's something, things like magazines, like I didn't set it up that way, but it automatically refreshes when they change articles on their homepage. So
interesting. I didn't even know it could do that. So I'm definitely going to be adding that soon.
Very good.
But it's funny, we're talking about this stuff. Like, so we, talking about someone that can't do it all. So we last year, or maybe it was the year before, switched to HubSpot. And I was super excited because it's like HubSpot is the Mac Daddy of, CRM, email marketing, all of that kind of stuff. And it's super expensive.
Super expensive.
And so we started using it, and, we got through a year, however long that we used it. And I was just like, you know what? Like, we are paying a ton of money for a million features that we're not using. And also, there's all of these things that I sort of assumed and thought that it could do that, guess what, it can't. So, like, guess what, if you're doing social media, you can't post stories from from HubSpot. You can't post stories from pretty much anywhere except for, using their own platform. And so I think I kind of had to give up the idea of having it all in one place where I can do all of that. So, now instead of spending my money on HubSpot, I'm spending my money on digital consultants who can essentially do that, but they have to put the dashboards together for us. I
was going to say, what do you use for, do you do auto publishing?
No.
For social?
No, not yet. We're looking at that with trying it in the next couple of months. So yeah, no, we use Hootsuite, and we kind of write up a variety of different posts for each article. Then we have someone whose job it is to go on and get everything scheduled, and then that gets edited, and then it's a process.
Yeah, well, those are so difficult because as social media changes, stuff on their back end, it'll log you out or kick you out, and things won't work. So it's one of those things that you really have to babysit. That was one thing that I hated.
Yes.
I've used, later Hootsuite and all the other ones that you can think of. And it was like, why didn't this go out? And it's like, oh, there's a new update on Instagram or this and that. I'm like, shit, man, am I just supposed to keep this thing open all day long?
There's so many moving parts. It's very frustrating. There are so many times where I'm like, it'll be, the middle of the day, and I'm like, did our newsletter go out? Wait, did it not go out? Did it happen today or when it was supposed to or not? And it's always like, one button that someone didn't push, or mostly it's usually my fault because it got assigned to me and then I, never actually did it.
Well, since we're talking about this stuff, we talked about this, offline, and that's, writing tips. Writing is a huge part of our life. If you are a good copywriter, I mean, you'll always have a job because, you can write blog articles, you can write copy for job listings. I mean, the list goes on and on. Even social media captions for, say, stories or a post or a Twitter tweet, any one of those things. And it's kind of one of those things where it can, make or break, how well some of your stuff does. So let's dive into that, because that is what you do and that is your background. So what are some tips on, writing better?
Well, so first of all, I would not call myself a good copywriter. I would say I'm a decent journalist. There's definitely a distinction. And fortunately, there are people on my team who are good copywriters. It's not the same skill set. There's definitely a lot of crossover. But yeah, copywriting is a lot quippier and punnier than what I'm able to do.
You think they're more in tune with like pop culture, and because it seems like that's kind of like a thing these days where you kind of got to stay up on what's going on in culture to, every once in a while you gotta, you kind of have to like mirror what's going on in society to kind of make it relevant.
There's definitely that element, but honestly, I think that the core of it, at least for me, is that when you are like, journalists only care about facts and copy editors like care about making something fun, right? And so I think there's a little bit of a clash there in mindset. And when you're a journalist, which this is actually good writing in general, but they're like, you try to say what you can say in as few words as possible. Like, don't add any fluff. You're not adding a bunch of adjectives to make it sound fun. Like, you are trying to deliver information. And so it's what's the quickest way that you can do that. And so I think that's so ingrained that when it comes to some of the copywriting, where you want to add some fun things and throw in some adjectives and some puns and the pop culture stuff, that's really hard for my brain to do, because it's just so ingrained in me to be like, like, keep it simple, stupid.
Like, you rather make a list of facts.
Yeah.
Than a bunch of metaphors and analogies.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And yeah, it's pretty funny. You can tell the difference. Like, when we hire writers, you can tell the difference between people who come from journalism and the people who come from like marketing or copywriting or like even kind of content writing. You can tell the difference immediately, because
they're one wearing like a Snoopy shirt and the other one's wearing like a SpaceX shirt or something.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I mean, the journalists are all like on drugs.
Oh, that's how you can tell. Okay. Perfect.
That's the other thing. Journalists are usually drunk by the end of the day. But yeah, no, you can tell pretty immediately, because like the copywriters and the blog writers and content writers, like, they're trying to kind of wrap it up and tie it into this like really pretty little bow, which is fine. And then the journalists are like, let me do this inverted pyramid where you get the most important facts at the top, and by the bottom, it's like the least important information. We're not trying to like tie it up into a bow. It's just like, this is what happened. There you go. That's all you need to know.
So I'd say for, pool professionals, whether you're in the service part of the industry or building pools or plumbing, electrical, you probably need a little of both of those skills. I mean,
yes.
Obviously you have a college degree, in journalism, but if people are going to be, wanting to take it to the next level, you probably got to be good at, collecting facts and then, trying to, condense that and making it as fun as possible. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So I do feel like the number one, I think, mistake I see when I look at people's websites or even social media posts to a certain extent is being too wordy and like trying to, really shooting for a word length as opposed to like what's the core information. sometimes, well, honestly, sometimes even in some of the ads that we get from people, you'll take a look at it and you're like, this is too much text. Nobody is going to read this. Like, you need to cut it down to what are the 3 most important things that you want someone to get out of this. And I think that's not a function of like journalism or copy editing. That's a function of editing, right? Always have somebody look over what you've done who can be honest with you and say, this is a lot. Or say, I know what you're trying to say here and it's really cute, but it's actually confusing if you don't know that reference that only you and your 10 friends know.
No inside jokes. Yeah.
No inside jokes. And so, yeah, it's really easy. I said this to someone the other day, and I hope it wasn't on this podcast, but Hemingway has a quote that's, write drunk, edit sober. And that's kind
of that.
I mean, me too. Like, that's kind of the approach that you have to take, is like, to get that first draft out, sometimes you just gotta like let it flow. And then you go back and you cut as much as possible and get it down to the bare bones of what you're trying to say. And then you can really kind of wordsmith every word if you want to. A lot of times you get down to the bare bones and that's really all you need.
So let me throw like a for instance at you and see if you can help me. Like I'll use maybe something that I will be doing and maybe you can, tell me how you would approach it. Okay. So I take photos, I do video, do drone, do those different things. Yeah. We've got, say a plumbing project in Scottsdale or Paradise Valley. I need to go there and pretty much tell the story of, what happened there. If it were you doing that, like what would you want to see and how would you go about writing about that? And I'm giving you a difficult one because, that's, it's not like going to see, a perfectly built swimming pool. Because for the most case, that's not everybody's situation where they're writing about, a complete swimming pool.
Right. So the very first question that you want to ask yourself, and honestly, the question that I ask my team, on a weekly basis, is who is our audience for this? So who is your audience and what do they care about? And so it's funny because that was kind of the number one thing drilled into our heads when I got my, fancy master's degree in journalism.
No, that is actually really good. Keep going.
That's all that matters, right? Is who is this for? So are you putting this on a website where you're trying to get more consumer customers? Are you trying to, is this for the end user of that pool? Or is this for someone in the trade who's going to care about some of the details in why and how you do things? And so I think that's the very first question that you have to answer. And sometimes the answer is both. And so
I was about to say, because what if it's, it's not just one. It could be somebody, building their own pool. It can be other pool companies that we'd like to work with. It could be just people that like to geek out on swimming pool plumbing. Like and those are 3 completely different but I also think you kind of answered your own question, because you're talking about people who want to do it themselves, or people who are going to geek out, or people in the trade. And all 3 of those, I would say, are people who care about the details, right? So I think that you can kind of distill it down with that in mind. Like, can somebody look at this and be able to go from, the beginning to the end correctly, or at least from the beginning to the end of this project, and understand why things need to be done the way that they're done. Obviously, every single pool is different, so you can't really give a step-by-step plan, but hopefully by the end of whatever they've looked at, they're able to take away those key concepts that they need to understand to do a really good job. Right. And so is there, I don't know, any rules that you follow, like beginning, middle, end? Do you have any tips for kind of formatting that stuff?
Oh man,
I know it's different for everything.
I know it's hard. But it's sort of like how do you plumb a pool? Well, every single one is different. It's the same thing a little bit with writing, right? Every story
let's say
is
an
different.
article. for an article? Like, I mean, what's your process? You're collecting assets, and do you kind of need that first to be able to kind of look at it and kind of, you know, be able to write about what you're looking at, or vice versa?
I mean, so the first thing, I mean, it really obviously starts with the idea. And so a lot of where you'll start with the article kind of depends on where did this idea come from, right? Sometimes it's coming from somebody in the industry who we can then use as a resource. Sometimes it's coming from things I've seen people talking about on social media. Sometimes it's from conversations I overheard at trade shows. I mean,
so are you making note of that when that happens?
Oh,
because
I mean,
you know, we all do it. We hear something, or you know, like one of my favorite websites is Swipe File. Do you ever go to Swipe File? So it's pretty much like a collection of like the best ads. I mean, since like the 20s, and they're just tons of stuff. But I see stuff and I don't screenshot it, or I don't save it, or I hear somebody saying something, even if it's, you know, maybe it's at SEP, in line at SEP, or a Facebook group or something like that. And if you're not, you know, documenting that, it's kind of done right there.
Right. I try to make note of things as they happen. I'm not as good as I wish I was. We have a Monday board that's just ideas, and it's kind of just notes, right, of things we've heard. Usually when I get back if I'm at a trade show or if I'm out of town, usually when I get back, I spend a day going through whatever actual notes I took, looking at the business cards that I have, and just kind of writing down everything that I can remember about all of those people, whether it's story ideas or cool products they had, or, you know, if they're interested in advertising. Of course, you got to remember those guys.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's kind of where it starts, right? Is where did that idea come from? And then you kind of have to, it's sort of like the scientific method in a way, where you have to like validate your concept, right? Like, is this a real story? Is this a real thing? And sometimes that's what the story building process is, you know, telling a writer, all right, this is what we've heard is happening. Go find out if it's true and write a story about it.
So say, I mean, most, including myself, like I didn't go to college, and, you know, I barely made it through high school, and I'm pretty much self-taught in most things that I do. But if you're not, you know, as savvy with the English language, I mean, I think you can get away with a lot more on social media than you can, say, on a email blast or something on your website, because that'll just kind of ding you by Google. But do you have any, I don't know, like tips or software or anything that, you know, say you write something, you know, you're kind of giving it your best, and you need something to kind of, you know, check?
Yeah. So I have a few things that I would recommend. So number one, so this is my favorite book on writing in general. So if you want to read about writing, highly recommend On Writing Well. I'm holding the 30th anniversary edition, which is probably from like 2006. So this book has been around for a long time. But it's very good, and it's very well written, right? Which makes it an easy read for a book that's about writing, which, you know, for a lot of people could sound pretty dull. And it's very much, there are some really great books about getting to know your audience, about telling stories, and about capturing all that kind of stuff. But if you really want to get into the nitty gritty of how do I write well, I mean, this book is really, really excellent. So that is, if you really
I just put it in my shopping cart. We're good to go.
if you really want to go there, I would definitely recommend that. But look, like, that's not going to be for everybody, obviously. And there are definitely some tools that you can use. The number one thing I would recommend for people to do is to, and we do this too, is to download the Grammarly extension for your browser. And that's amazing, because then pretty much anytime you are typing anything into a web browser, so whether that is an email, whether that is on your website, whether that is social media post, or what was the other, or, anything that you're typing into a browser, it will check your grammar. And it is very accurate. It's excellent. It's, you can really take it far. Like, you can set it up so that you have sort of the same tone of voice across your whole team if you sign up for an account, which is a pretty cool function. It's kind of been interesting lately. Because we use it, and there have been a few times where I'll pull up a social media post that we're editing, and it's like, your tone has changed slightly with this. And it's like, oh, okay. So there's
I was going to say, does it keep you from sending stupid emails? Like, do you really want to send this?
Definitely not. So, but it'll make sure that you sound intelligent when you send that email at 3:00 in the morning and that you shouldn't be sending.
Nice.
Yeah, no, it's a really, really great tool. I definitely recommend it. I would say that the other thing, so I think the big thing too, especially when you're writing for like your own website more than anything else, is you just want to be consistent. And so that just means that you need to decide on a style and stick with it, right? So it's like, are we going to use serial commas or not? Like, just decide. There's no like right or wrong. No one's going to look at it and be like, well, they didn't, capitalize. Just be consistent. That's really the only thing that matters.
So if you're going to misspell something, be consistent.
No,
just kidding. Don't
things.
Do that.
Don't misspell things. But you'll have Grammarly, and that will catch your misspellings too, which is very great.
So what would you consider like a style of writing in a way that what's on your website could mirror what you do on social? Yeah.
Well,
like maybe there's a big brand that you know of that does a really good job at that.
There are lots of brands that are good at this. I think I'm going to have to default to journalism again because, so the Associated Press has a style guide. And so like if you're working with somebody in magazines or newspapers, they're going to talk about AP style.
What's
that? That is actually the other resource I was going to suggest is you can get an AP style handbook, and that's a really easy way to answer those questions of like, should I capitalize this? Do I need a comma here? Should I put a dash here? I think that
So what is that? That's another book that you can buy? Because I like that.
It's a book you can buy, but also you can get an online subscription, which is what I do. And honestly, I probably look at it at least once a day and ask it a question because...
You said that's an APC?
AP style, Associated Press style.
Okay.
So yeah, it's, again, I am not one of those people who like lives and dies by hard and fast grammar rules. Again, like I think if you are clear and people can understand what you're trying to say, that is the most important thing. More important than do you have all your commas in the right places and all of that kind of stuff. It's really like, is it clear? Is it consistent? Is it concise? Those are really the most important things. So these tools are really helpful if you want to be, or if your company needs to be, that precise. These are great things that you can do to get there. But I think that for most of the people that listen to this podcast, really all of those grammar rules and stuff, that it doesn't really matter. Like what really matters is it for your audience? Is it clear? Is it concise? Can they understand what you're trying to say? And that's half the battle and harder than it sounds.
Yeah. Do you have any, tips for writing on social media? Like I think you were saying earlier, like kind of keep it short and sweet.
Yeah, again, I don't think that that's something that I, in particular, am very good at, which is why we've hired people who are better at it than I am.
You're the fact checker?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like my brain does not work in the social media ways. But I do think that... So
this is good because having like a team that can help out with that, because what I would like to do is, have a title for what I want to do first and then go get that photo. The hard part sometimes, especially if it's not something that I'm super educated in, is, you know, being technical there. But at the same time, it's I'd rather talk about like the feeling of being there, because it's like, you know what you're looking at, you know. That's always a thing when I see somebody like describing what they're seeing in a picture. I'm like, I know, I'm looking right at it. I'm looking at a sky. I'm looking at this, but it's like, I kind of want to see, like, it was a gloomy day, and while I was doing this drone shot, a dog bit me in the ass, but I kept my cool. I didn't let it get me down. I just did this. I had some Pringles. Yeah, I just more real.
You want to set the scene.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you were, that's something that a photo can't do, and I think that's probably why video is getting so popular, is because you can really kind of set the tone of what it's like to be in the situation.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because I had that conversation with someone this week. Because I was talking to her about, okay, well, writing photo captions, that's going to be your job sometime. And I said, you know, the one thing that I hate in photo captions is when you're basically just saying what the picture is. Like, we can see these people aren't dumb. They can see that it's, you know, Chris is loading a bucket of chemicals to the back of his truck. It's like, yeah, I get that. You know, so it's like, I told her the best captions are something that brings something new to that, right? Is, you know, can either are pulling something out of the story that adds some color to what we're looking at, or sometimes you can even go back to, like you were saying, like things people wouldn't know from reading the story. You know, maybe in your interview, he talked about, he wears a back brace because of this, or, you know, who knows what it could be, right? Like there's all kinds of things that you can add that are so much better than just, this is Chris so-and-so, he's 30 and he is putting chemicals in the back of a pickup truck.
Yeah. It's, you know, say for that instance, it's about, you know, being a technician is one of the most difficult jobs. You're often required to lift things that are X amount of weight. And we have this type of hazmat insurance, or, you know what I mean? There's like so many other like back end things that you're not going to see in that photo that you can talk about.
Yeah, exactly. It makes it more fun for sure.
Definitely. So do you have any other like books, websites, or anything else that you'd like to share? Cause I geek out on that. Like I subscribe to Medium just for that. When people say these are the top, you know, 10 things that you need, which it's a double-edged sword. Cause
I know. Yeah. Those would really be my top 3. There are so many books out there. Honestly, I think, and what I try to do is just read a lot of stuff. And I think that more than anything can give you a sense of what's good and what's bad and what you can emulate. Like I'm pretty suspicious of writers who say they don't read. It's like, that's not a good sign, because you're not getting better if you're not reading other people's stuff, if you're not looking at other magazines, if you're not, you know, reading fiction and nonfiction and trying to get a wider variety of styles in your brain. I think it's the same a little bit with social media. That's probably not the genre that I enjoy, which is probably why I'm not very good at it. So I don't spend as much time studying it as I should. Maybe the other things that are of more interest to me personally. But I think that too, it's like, you know, you ask like what brands do a good job of that. I think, you know, you find the ones that you really connect with, and don't just read them in a passive way, but really study what they're doing, because there's a method to their madness.
Yeah, that's great. And I think, you know, something that I love that you said at the beginning was, you know, who are you writing this for? It doesn't really matter what platform it is. If you have a good understanding of who's going to be reading what you're writing, that should really help, you know, dictate what you're going to write. So I think that's huge.
Yeah, it was kind of funny because for the longest time before I bought the magazines, I had a really, really hard time writing Pool Pro, because I could not figure out who our audience was. It's like, is it builders? Is it service companies? Is it, it felt like we were trying to kind of be all things to all people. And as we all know, the pool industry is huge and covers so many different things. And so when I bought the magazines, I said, we are going to pick someone, that we're going to have a person that we are writing to. And, when we chose the service companies, and it has made it so much easier. So now whatever story we're talking about or whatever story we're writing, I can look at that and say, what does your average, service technician get out of this? And that changes a lot about how you write it and how you frame it and what it becomes important in that piece. And so, and it took us a while to get there.
Yeah. I've heard people talk about, building an avatar of maybe it's your ideal, customer, and kind of, going in depth with it, what they look like, what their interests are, and everything that you do is to, make that person happy, I guess.
Yeah. No, it's a really good exercise. Even if you don't, you're not going to stick with it 100% or stick to it 100%. But I think it's definitely a good exercise to think through those things in that kind of detail. Because it also helps when you bring new people on your team for you to be able to describe that person to them and what they care about. And honestly, your website analytics can be really helpful in that.
Yeah.
We can see that Pool Pro readers are mostly men, in their 30s who read a lot about sports. That kind of stuff is important to understand about what people care about and why, how you need to reach them. So it's interesting.
Yeah. And how do you feel about AI writing?
There is maybe a story in this issue that was written by, and it was written by AI. I found myself with one too many things on my plate. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to give this a try. So we'll see if you guys can guess which one it is.
I'm going to actually try to see if I can figure it out.
Well, and honestly, I cannot imagine a world in which you could actually have something spit back out to you that's actually printable. This definitely was not, and still needed a lot of work, but it kind of got the bare bones that I needed to get it done. And that's what I really needed in that moment was I can't even start this. I am so tired.
Yeah.
and I just need it to be finished. It helps get the ball rolling. It really does. And so yeah, that's kind of, it's not, I'm not going to start assigning articles to Chat GPT, but it could be a useful tool if you use it correctly. It definitely at one point gave me a quote from someone that we didn't talk to, and I was like, yeah, not going to do that.
That's interesting because I think I've used it a handful of times. I've not published anything using it, but I like that it can keep you from copyright infringement. You know what I mean? If you're pulling inspiration from different places, and there's just so much copy out there, in the digital world, that you could very well write something and it could be word for word what somebody said. But that thing, the most popular ones, I don't know them off the top of my head, but they do, spit out original copy that hasn't been said before. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think it will ever take the place of human brains. I don't see that happening, but yeah, it can be helpful when you've got some writer's block going on. It was better than drinking a bottle of wine, which is usually how I get rid of writer's block. So
much healthier. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I felt better in the morning.
Did you have anything else you wanted to cover? Yeah.
No, that definitely, I had more to say about that than I thought I did.
Yeah. I could talk about this all day. Yeah.
Well, it's funny.
We'll expose ourselves too much.
I know. Yeah. Well, you're like, hey, how about you get some tips for writing? And I was like, oh man, I don't know if I have any tips for writing, but it's no, this is what I do all day. I think about it a lot. So I actually have more tips than I think.
You're in it all day long. So it's the more question you ask, oh yeah, I've got 100 things, in that. Yeah. But I do that book, man, those are always like the things that help the most is because there's so much shit out there. You know what I mean? Like try like researching like a good one to just keep in your vehicle or on you just to kind of, help, or something you can read at night to kind of just make you a little bit better, than you were the day before.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Megan. I really appreciate your time as usual. Where can people find you, and where can people pick up the latest magazine?
Yeah, so you can request a free subscription on poolpromag.com. You can also pick Pool Pro up for free at SCP and Superior Pool Products locations. I actually went to a Superior location up here in Oklahoma City and saw Pool Pro like in the wild. It was very exciting.
Nice.
So yeah, and of course we're across all the socials. So you can find us there as well at Pool Pro Mag.
Very good. Thank you again, Megan.
Thank you.